Hello lads, so this little lesson is going to be a little bit different from most of the ones you'll see online about clutch control. This one's going to mainly revolve around clutch control in traffic and combining that up with starting on a hill if it comes to that too. This video is not going to be about how to incorporate it into your driving test really, just the actual act of pulling away and stopping every time smoothly in traffic and doing so in a way that doesn't make you sweat buckets and ruin your clutch at the same time. This video is mainly tips and tricks to assist the driving you already know. It's not the very basics, so if you're unsure how to pull away, this might not be the best place to start, and there are a couple more videos which I'll link if you want to start at the very beginning. Traffic and hill starting is generally one of the biggest fears when it comes to learner drivers, especially those newer to driving a manual car and with less of a grasp on clutch control. I've also noticed when recording, I do a weird wiggly foot thing with my clutch foot when I've got the clutch in and I'm a bit uncomfortable with where it is, so yeah, ignore the wiggly foot. So I've said this in previous videos and you may already be doing it, but I've spoken to so many people who don't when they started learning or didn't. Put your heel on the floor when you have the clutch at the biting point. It's so much easier to be sensitive with the clutch with a point to hold your foot against. If your leg is floating in midair, you have to use so much more muscle and effort to keep it still. This made so much difference for me when I was learning, and when I first got in a car, it was just something so simple that no one mentioned to me and made such a big difference when I realized it. Sometimes you have to make tiny little adjustments with the clutch, like you might have released it a little bit too much and you'll need to very gently push it back in. Keeping your heel on the floor means you'll be able to do tiny little movements like this eventually when you start getting better, and may stop you stalling in certain situations. The main thing you should focus on when driving in traffic is patience. Patience with moving off and with the clutch itself. So don't rush to move off as soon as the cars in front of you do. You're going to want to take your time. If you're just following each and every movement of the car in front of you, you're going to be doing sort of more clutch movement and more clutch wear than you need to, and it's going to be more effort than you should really be exerting at that time. So that, along with rushing to get the clutch up, is one of the main things that causes a problem, as there's only two outcomes, right? Stalling or a big skid. And in traffic, you don't want to be doing big skids, as you're going to look like either a nutter or someone who doesn't know what they're doing. A very common question is how much do you need to rev the car to get moving whilst you're in traffic, or even when you're on a hill? So if you're moving off in traffic on a flat ground at slow pace, very little revs are normally needed. Small engine petrol cars, which are most cars in the UK, will need a small amount of throttle to help them get along, as they're fairly easy to stall at slow speeds and low RPMs. Whilst a lot of diesel cars sometimes won't need any power at all to get moving, but it will help to have a little bit. If you need to move off faster, then slightly more revs and very slightly quicker clutch release can be used. Too fast on the clutch will normally stall the car though. 99% of your problems when stalling a car will be that you're not just holding the car at the biting point, you're just trying to whip it out really fast. Even on a hill though, you can get away with fairly low revs. Think 2,500 and under, but remember that the lower you go with the revs, the longer you should normally have to hold the car at the biting point to start moving in the first place. So how close should you get to the person in front of you in traffic? Well, not very, really. You shouldn't be riding up their bumper because even on flat ground, people can roll back if they don't notice that their handbrake's off or the handbrake's not working or something like that. So give people space, and if someone does start rolling back and you're concerned that they're coming too close to your car, then a little polite tap on the horn can help you there. If you're on a hill as well, then this is amplified because of course people are hill starting and some people aren't as good as others, and sometimes people might have dodgy handbrakes like they would on a flat ground. If you're concerned in any way about rolling back or it's something that worries you, it's pretty simple to make sure you can avoid. Just make sure you're keeping the handbrake engaged until you're at the biting point with some power and not before. If you release the handbrake and aren't at the biting point, you're going to roll back, and reacting to this normally ends up with a stall, so try and avoid that if you can. So if you do actually stall in traffic, which I handily actually did on camera, which is good at least, remember to take things at your own pace so you don't rush and stall again, if you can. Handbrake on, have your clutch in, or be in neutral and restart the car. So take a deep breath, try again, and if you're on a hill, make sure you get straight on the brake, handbrake, so you don't roll back into someone and cause an accident. That's the main priority really, just make sure your brake's on. Without crashing into the lad in front of you, driving in traffic involves a lot of reading down the road a few cars in front. You can get a good idea of when to start preparing to move off in advance if you're not just staring at the car's brake lights in front of you. And there is another reason to not ride their bumper too, so you don't end up inside of it. That leads nicely on though to the question of when should I put the car in neutral in traffic. And this really depends on the situation, and it's mainly up to you and how much you're left legs aching by this point. If you know you'll be stopping for a little while, say 10 seconds or more, feel free to put the car in neutral and take it out of gear. And remember the handbrake too. Make sure that if the cars start moving and your car is out of gear that you don't rush to find a gear and panic to get the biting point. That normally always ends up in a stall, so remember, be patient and take your time. So what is actually going to damage your clutch whilst you're driving in traffic or in traffic on a hill or anything like that? We're going to go over a few of these points. The first being riding the clutch. Now most of you will know what this is. It's when you're just touching the clutch very gently whilst you're driving normally, and this is going to put wear on the throwout bearing, which even though the actual piece isn't that expensive, the labour is going to be. So avoid that if you can. Use the little rest plate to the left of the clutch if you've got one, or just don't put your foot on the clutch when it's not in use, that sort of thing. So this counts to when you're sitting in traffic, you're not moving, the car's in gear and you've got the clutch in, or even neutral and you've got the clutch in. There's no point holding it in when you're just sat there. If you're sat there for just a couple seconds, then you can hold the clutch in, that's fine. But if you're sat there and you know the traffic's going to be, red light for a minute or so, it's probably a best idea to pop the car in neutral and just let go of the clutch, give your leg a rest, that sort of thing. So it's 2 birds in 1 stone. Holding the biting point for longer than you should, either with high revs or even lower revs for a longer period of time, it's just not really needed, and it's going to put a lot of heat and energy through the clutch plates, and you're just going to see them wearing out faster than normal. It will get definitely a lot easier the better you get at driving, so you can bring the revs down when you're moving off. You don't need to sort of rev the car just because you're not that great at the clutch, so don't worry about it. You will get better over time, and if you're pulling away on a hill, don't be afraid to use higher revs because it's better that than stalling. Some instructors might teach you to use the biting point to keep the car still whilst you make your checks before pulling away. In the real world, this probably isn't something you're going to want to do that much. Take that half a second extra to set the revs and get to the biting point with the handbrake on, and then ease it off as you pull away. Don't use your clutch as something to lean on. It's not a handbrake. And that's what handbrakes are for. So in my eyes, that's the best way. Like, it might be simpler to use your clutch and just set the biting point and lean on it whilst you make your checks, because then you're less likely to probably stall, you're less likely to rush. But realistically, it's going to take you half a second to a second longer to get to the biting point again, so I wouldn't worry too much. Alright lads, thank you everyone for watching the video. I really appreciate the support recently. Thank you for 22,000 subs. I should really do a special video. I'm still waiting to see if I can do some go-karting and make that into a video, so hope you enjoy that when that comes out. Make sure you let me know what videos you'd like to see in the future, whether it's vlogs, it's how-to videos, or even like go-karting, racing tutorials, that sort of thing. I will chat to you guys soon. Make sure you drive safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.